Thank you, Deputy Speaker. Deputy Speaker, once again I stand to note that on a very critical piece of legislation that deals with the welfare of Australia's older Australians who are relying on the pension, we have the Labor Party yet again playing games by moving a second reading speech amendment. They know it, the member opposite knows it, and yet they can't help themselves. There is nothing that they will not play games on. And so here, once again, we have an opportunity to debate how to make the lives of ordinary Australians, of people who spent their entire working lives saving for their retirement, better. And we have the Labor Party moving a second reading amendment, rather, so they can post on their stupid and silly and idiotic website run by that front group, openfoundations.org, that will no doubt say that every member of the House on this side strongly, like as though I get to say, no, Mr Speaker, I'm not just voting for this, I'm strongly voting for this, that we strongly voted against the welfare of pensioners. Let's just be very clear about that. This is dishonest politics by the Labor Party. These are untruths. This is misinformation. This is the sort of stuff that they accuse Clive Palmer of doing day in and day out, and they do it and they don't try to stop it, and they're in this parliament enabling it. And we've seen it today already, Mr Deputy Speaker. We've seen it already today. We saw today on the front page of the Sydney Morning Herald, a newspaper not known for its support of any sensible party of government or any sensible political movement in this country. But yet on the front page of the Sydney Morning Herald today, the award-winning journalist Rob Harris has undertaken an investigation that I think Bernstein and Woodward would have been proud of, to discover that those crossbenchers who claim to be independents and disaffected Liberals, where in fact they're fake Liberals and fake independents, but they're real supporters of the Labor Party. They're real supporters of the Labor Party. Well, I say to the members opposite, you can complain as much as you like, but one of the impacts, and I'll speak to the point of order.
Yes, I call the member for Moreton.
Deputy Speaker, we're 3 minutes in and the member for Mackellar hasn't touched on the legislation at all. He has to at least be tangential, surely, when it comes to the piece of legislation in front of us.
All right, please proceed.
Deputy Speaker, maybe if the Labor Party stopped moving second reading amendments that basically have everything, including the kitchen sink in it, I would actually then have to speak to the amendment. But we've had the member for McEwen speak on everything but what was in the legislation. So I don't quite...
Thank you, Deputy Speaker. Surely if he's taking a point of order on my point of order, he should refer to my point of order.
I say yes. Please proceed.
Under the sun is in order because of your second reading amendment. So you can't have it both ways. The Labor Party can't come in here, move second reading amendments so that they can facilitate the misinformation that openfoundations.org goes on with all the time. And the member opposite, he can carry on as much as he likes about it, but you are just as guilty of this. You are just as guilty of this, of using this parliament not for debate, not for actually improving the lives of pensioners, but for simply playing undergraduate political games. And you don't like being called out on it, but the truth is I'm going to stand here on every piece of legislation and call you out on it. Because what you have been doing over the last 5 years is appalling and it denigrates our democracy. And frankly, you all should be ashamed of yourself. Sorry, those opposite should be ashamed of themselves because they take votes from the crossbench, which today we found out on the front page of the Sydney Morning Herald, from the award-winning journalist Rob Harris, who has clearly undertaken months of investigation to understand this, that those opposite, those who regularly 88% of the time vote with the Labor Party, have been say that they're in favour of the climate, say they're in favour of integrity, and say that they're in favour of transparency. Well, wow, wasn't this a doozy of a day? Front page of the Herald. No doubt this story's been there for any other news organisation to report on. The ABC, Crikey, the New Daily, but it took an intrepid reporter at the Sydney Morning Herald. Not, as I say, Deputy Speaker, a paper known for its support of right-of-centre political movements, to actually finally say the hypocrisy stinks so much we are going to report on it. And those opposite, they take their votes. And what we found was today that those on the crossbench have been accepting donations from coal investors. Not just coal mines, directors of coal companies. Not just normal coal investors. These coal investors bought their coal mines from Eddie Obeid. Eddie Obeid. So we've got both honest, we've both got untransparent, we've got...
Point of order, Deputy Speaker. We are now 7 minutes into a 15-minute speech, and the member for Mackellar, I've given him as much generosity as possible, but he has no reference to the Social Services and Other Legislation Amendment, Pension Long Scheme Enhancements Bill at all. At all. Surely he must make some reference to the legislation in front of us.
I call the Minister.
Mr Speaker, the standing orders are quite clear that opposition get one opportunity to call a point of order on relevance.
That's right. I ask the member for Mackellar to return to the substance of the bill.
Well, Deputy Speaker, of course I adhere to your ruling. And I think that the substance of this legislation is about how to make the lives of older Australians better. That's what I think the substance of a thing. So I'll do what those opposite want. This debate was about the Social Services and Other Legislations Amendment, Pension Loan Scheme Enhancement Bill 2021. But they've moved a second reading amendment, which basically means anything that the sun shines on is now allowed to be part of this debate, because that is what all their amendments are about. Their amendments are about playing undergraduate games with the future of older Australians. And I will go back to where I was rudely interrupted before, no doubt, the member for Moreton calls quorum on me, because that's their next usual tactics when they're hearing something they don't like hearing about, which is how they take the votes from someone who has been receiving donations from a coal investor who bought a coal mine from Eddie Obeid, who had an adverse finding at the New South Wales Independent Against Corruption, who then split that one transaction amongst 8 members of their family, that this was only discovered when a reporter from the Sydney Morning Herald, being Rob Harris, had the courage, because no doubt he was discouraged from writing this story, and then posted the story. And that is why this government fights day in and day out to make the lives of pensioners better, and it can't do it because of those opposite.
Yeah, Speaker, the member for Mackellar is defying your ruling right now. You called for him to return to the subject of the bill, and he has gone about as far away from it as he's ever been, and I'd ask you to return him to the bill that's before us today.
Yes, I ask the member to return to the question before the chair.
Deputy Chair, I continue to be relevant to the second reading amendment moved by those opposite. And I encourage them to stop playing their puerile, undergraduate political games of moving these second reading amendments so that they can post on some puerile, undergraduate misinformation website that those on this side of the House don't support pensioners. And that's the problem. That's the problem right here. That's the problem with the donations. That's the problem with their speeches. That's the problem with their tactics. They don't want to talk about what the real issues are, because they're only about misinformation, hiding things, and not telling the Australian people what's really going on. So we've had speeches from those opposite, literally all of it incorrect. So we've had those opposite trying to claim that this government has been trying to institute the cashless debit card for pensioners. That is untrue. That is untrue. They continue to repeat it online. Why? Why do they continue to do that? Because they're part of an institutional political movement that can only win votes by misinforming the Australian people. If they want to have a genuine debate about how to make the lives of pensioners better, everyone on this side's up for it. But they want to move second reading amendments. And then we had those opposite making the absurd claim that we're the ones responsible for trying to increase the age limit for the pension. Everyone in Australia knows that Wayne Swan began that process under the Rudd-Gillard government. But somehow they're trying to fit up this side of the house with it. And once again, they'll have all their little front groups out there making that claim. But I tell you what, they might make a political point. They might get the money from the coal investors who bought their mine from Eddie Obeid, and 9 times out of 10 they might actually be able to hide that from the Australian people. But the Australian people are no fools. They know when they're not being told the truth. They know this government is actually the government that for decades have been the one side of this House that has supported and enhanced the lives of ordinary Australians on the pension. Australians know that. They know the pension wasn't started by the Whitlam government as those opposite assert. It was actually started by the Menzies government. It was actually about the caring and being compassionate towards those people who were seeking to retire. They know that this side of the House has consistently and constantly fought for measures that are about making those people who have spent their lives trying to make their retirement more comfortable, more possible. I'll give you one example, Deputy Speaker. Section 56(2) of the Superannuation Industry Supervision Act, which was designed to stop trustees from when they were fined because they had done something wrong, paying that fine out of members' funds. Let me make that clear. Stealing money from ordinary Australians' retirement savings. And what we found out last Thursday is that almost $250 million has been taken out of the retirement accounts of ordinary Australians by industry super funds. And why? Because as APRA confirmed for us, Australia's largest super fund, Australian Super, was apparently one administrative error away from being insolvent. Is no one literally interested in this House on that side? The fact that $233 billion worth of retirement savings of ordinary Australians is run by a company that has $12 in share capital. $12. APRA doesn't seem interested because of legislative changes moved by those on those sides. Don't come into this chamber and try and hoodwink Australians into believing that you care about the climate when you're taking money from coal miners, that you care about honesty and integrity when you didn't declare that, and that coal investor bought his coal mine from Eddie Obeid. Don't come into this chamber and claim that you care about Australian pensioners, but you don't actually care about the fact that the largest superannuation fund in Australia is run by a company that has $12 in share capital while it manages $233 billion in retirement savings for ordinary Australians. And the reason you don't care is because they donate to your political party. Don't come into this chamber and make claims that you care about pensioners or that the cashless debit card is something.
Thank you, Deputy Speaker. The member for Mackellar is making outrageous accusations about you, and I would ask you to ask him to come back to the legislation before the chamber.
I ask the member not to use the term "you" in your debate, please.
Thank you, Deputy Chair. So this guarantee, let's be very clear, this is a guarantee that make the lives of ordinary, hard-working Australians who've done nothing wrong except spend their entire lives saving for their retirement better, gives better access, better equality, more freedom, more fairness in this society, and preserves those things that we actually care about. Those opposite don't.
Order. The member's time has